Good morning, students. It's Monday morning. Glad to be with you today. We're going to get right into things. Please look at the calendar to see what's on the agenda today, but we're going to finish up the Russian Revolution notes. Our quiz tomorrow will be on the notes on the Russian Revolution, and we're getting close to ending the chapter, actually. So your assessment, your test might look a little bit different than we've done before. That I expect will be coming toward the end of the week, probably on Friday, since it's essentially a take-home test and you'll be doing it at home. It'll probably be more essay style, things that require a little bit more thought. So bear with me and we'll get through today's lesson. So I think on Friday we talked about how the Bolshevik Revolution had taken over in Russia. Lenin is the head, he's kind of was the man to step into that power vacuum when the Tsar was taken out. But Trotsky was the head of the most powerful Soviet, and that's in Petrograd at the time, which was the old St. Petersburg, which will actually be renamed to Leningrad. But he is the head of this provisional government. So the Bolsheviks renamed themselves the Communists, and this is where we get the Communist Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution. Now remember, in order for the Bolsheviks to really gain power, and the word Bolshevik means majority, for them to become a strong majority power, they had to promise people some things in order to get their support, and they promised to get Russia out of World War I. And Lenin does that. He signs the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Brest-Litovsk is a city, today it would be considered around the Ukraine area. And it was basically in order for Russia to kind of give up and just quit fighting, they had to give land over to Germany. Germany wasn't just going to say, oh yeah, that's fine, just pull out of the war. You can do that, but then you're going to lose some land. And they cede that land to Germany, and this is in March of 1918. So Russia pulls out of World War I. Now think back to your timelines. All of these things happen, in a succession. The Russian Revolution begins in 1917. And 1917 is when the United States formally enters the war. Russia pulls out of World War I in 1918. This is very, I'm not going to say coincidental, but this is very important to understand that around the time that the United States was entering the war, Russia was exiting the war, and they're both on the same side. However, the Allies tried to keep Russia in war. They knew that Russia, while they were probably industrially and militarily undersupplied, they were still a powerhouse, and they were still what was helping the Eastern Front from using all their resources to the Western Front. So the Allies tried to supply Russia to stay in the war, especially to give it to anti-communists, to those who were still loyal to the Tsar. Well, the communists do not like that. First of all, they agreed to exit the war because they are in power now, yet their supposed allies are actually on their enemy's side. Remember, Russia is going through a civil war as well. So this civil war breaks out. And it's the Red Army, the communists, fighting against the White Army, the loyalists, those who were still on the side of the Tsar. You can see the Tsar, Nicholas and his wife Alexandria there, and their whole family taking a picture. They were basically imprisoned. Now, when I say imprisoned, it was a little bit like when Louis and Marie Antoinette and the family were shuttled off to Tuileries in Paris. Remember, they brought them into Paris to see the devastation and destruction and starvation in Paris. Remember that with the French Revolution? This is kind of the same thing. they were allowed to live, and they lived in a beautiful, beautiful home, but they had to be kind of secured away, and he was definitely not able to rule as the Tsar. He had no power whatsoever. He was a prisoner in his own home, or somebody else's home. Well, lots of conspiracy theories, lots of things happened, but the Tsar and his family are murdered. It was a cold-blooded murder. Shot them all point blank. There's some people who said, oh, they were taking a picture. There's lots of different stories that went behind it. The communists, they shot them in cold blood. How it happened, doesn't really matter. They took their bodies into the mountains, into these areas, burned their bodies. Supposedly Anastasia survived, maybe not. I'd like you to pause the video right here and watch that embedded video. It's just a short one. That it's a pretty good understanding of how important the Tsar was actually to Russia. Okay, so I hope you watched that video, and now we're back. And so now the Tsar is completely out of the picture, which allows Lenin and Trotsky to really rule communist Russia. So it was called Trotsky's Red Army. Now remember, communism is always kind of connected with the color red. So the Red Army is the communist army. And Trotsky was essentially the head of the army. He had very strict discipline. They were expected to have all the same common goals. They had very strong convictions. You did it his way or, no way. And in fact, you never even questioned his authority or their authority, because you would be, you'd be shot. In fact, you see those bodies lined up right there. You didn't go against Trotsky, because there was no room for negotiation or compromise. It was his way only. And in fact, the Red Terror began. And the Red Terror is kind of this time period of utter chaos and destruction in Russia. And by this time, we're starting to call them the Soviet Union. Well, not technically, but we'll get there. But we'll still call them Russia right now. But the Red Terror is set up, and this is where you didn't know if you could trust your neighbor. You wouldn't have talked politics or the government or the economy to anybody. Sometimes you didn't even know if your own thoughts were safe from the terror, because they would kill you. Sometimes, it's almost like they could read your mind. They would listen in on conversations. They would try to, implant spies. They started something called the secret police, the Cheka, and they destroyed all opposition. Now remember, there is a lot of people who were still loyal to the Tsar. These are the people they're trying to root out. So communists at this point had total control of Russia, and they became very hostile to the Allies, to the British, to the Americans, to the French, for the support against them in the Russian Civil War. Remember, the Allies wanted to keep Russia in the war as much as possible, because although Russia was a little bit lagging in industrialization, they were a huge support on the Eastern Front. And now the communists feel like they were being stabbed in the back by their allies, because they had helped their enemy, the Loyalists, or the White Army. So the last thing I really want to kind of bring up is this thought of how World War II is going to end. Now, I'm not even going to talk about this slide right here. We're going to do that in the next couple of days. But I want you to really think about this question. And there is a question posted on Haiku that I will ask you to write a paragraph today, and submit your paragraph on Haiku. But why the Russian Revolution happened and how important was the timing of the Russian Revolution. If the Russian Revolution happened in 1917 and the war ends in 1918 and the Tsar is killed in 1918, Russia pulls out of the war in 1918, the United States really is coming in much larger forces in 1918. It's a really intriguing question to think. Did Russia have to leave the war in order for the Allies to win? Were they just too big of a weight on the Allied forces? So, like I said, we're not going to get into this slide today, but I want you to think about both the question of if Russia hadn't have left the war, how things would have looked, and then answer the question that is posted. It says Russian Revolution prompt. Think about that question. Give me a thoughtful paragraph, at least 6 to 8 sentences of responding to that paragraph prompt. I will be back with you tomorrow. We will be doing a quiz, open note quiz. Talk to you then.